NFL owners kind of tabled a lot of the rules. The tush push is going to remain. They tabled that one.
I think tabled it for what, a month, correct?
Yeah,
revisit it next month.
Yeah, at least a month. What it means is they didn't have enough votes to kill it.
It sounds like what? It sounded like 16, about half the teams.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to kill this tush push, and of course the Bucs think that they the one team that has maybe stopped it at least a little bit, and Todd Bowles thinks it's unfair to kind of single out a team that's good at something. That said, a lot of different rules discussed, including one by Todd Bowles, which is the no mercy rule. Todd Bowles said, as we had breakfast at the NFC coaches early on this, was it Tuesday morning? I guess we did it. That he believes that his team knows how to win. They've demonstrated that. And what he doesn't feel good about is the way they finished the season from a playoff perspective. And in the middle of the season drought that they've had. And he said, and I thought this was interesting, that he believes that they lack a killer instinct, which is an interesting thing to say about your football team, but I know what he means. It has been a team that has, sort of not handled prosperity very well. Those 2 3-1 starts in particular. And he said that we've got to have a killer instinct, and we've got to try to blow people out and try to win the division instead of it going down to the last week. Because what Todd Bowles knows is this: if you put yourself in that position time after time, you're going to end up losing in the end. Like last year, they were sort of fortunate in the sense that they were done with Atlanta and they got swept by Atlanta, which is why they were kind of in the position they were in, where they had to win a bunch of games at the end. But if they were playing the Falcons instead of maybe the Panthers the last week or the next to last week, that might have changed things. And so I think he understands that, they're a good football team, but they've not been consistent enough throughout the season, especially the middle part. And you can't count on just like rallying. Now, it's good that you play your best ball in November, December. That's what you want to be as a football team. But he thinks they're more. He thinks they're Super Bowl contenders and all that. Then you need to sort of act like it and be consistent throughout the entire year. So I understand, like he's tired of riding the wave a little bit.
I thought those comments were interesting.
I did too, since a lot of people would say, well, they don't have a killer instinct because you don't have one.
I was just going to say that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't go for it for 2-point conversion at Kansas City.
There you go.
From behind, and
that's what I thought of.
You probably weren't supposed to win.
Mm-hmm.
Some of your time management issues, some of your
yep.
I would say that the team follows the coach. And I don't think the coach displays a killer instinct in games.
He definitely does not in critical decisions, right? When to go for it. And I've seen him go for it on fourth down and stuff like that. But other teams, it's part of their DNA. No, you don't have to ask anybody if the Philadelphia Eagles, right, tush push notwithstanding, but you don't have to ask if the Philadelphia Eagles are going to go for it in the first quarter on fourth down at the 40-yard line. They are. They come into the game. Detroit, I forget which team they played last year. They had to win a critical game, and Dan Campbell told his team, we're going for it on every fourth down.
It was the Vikings. It was the division.
Yeah, for the division title. That's right. And his mentality was, right or wrong, and they kind of did this anyway, but I think that's where Todd sort of, needs to evolve as a coach. And, you set the tone, right, when it comes to the killer instinct. And, and that can be, now it's interesting because as a defensive play caller, he's very aggressive. And if things aren't going well, he's more aggressive. His philosophy, and he kind of picked this up from Bruce Arians coaching with him all those years, is, you just don't bring the house on every play because you can bring the house on every play. You do it. If things are going bad, you have to dial up more stuff, right? Like you have to, go down in a ball of glory here, but fire everything you have at people. So, like from a play calling standpoint, he is aggressive, and yet you don't see those decisions, those critical decisions that a head coach has to make. He's a lot more cautious than you need to be if, in fact, you're going to talk about killer instincts. It's a great observation, Steve. It's exactly what I thought at the time was, well, There's nobody better to set the tone than the head coach when it comes to killer instincts.
And you're right. Defensively, he does, and some of that's cost them. They ran cover 0 against the Rams.
The Rams,
when you're trying to go to the NFC Championship game. Now, you had a player miss an assignment, Levante David.
You had a hurt player.
It wasn't necessarily a bad call.
No,
you didn't execute it, which that happens sometimes. I mean, not every gutsy decision or killer instinct play or whatever goes successfully.
Yeah.
You still have 11 guys on the field that have to execute the play.
They have to execute. You also have to consider that on that play that Levante was injured and he wasn't able to do much of anything except stand around.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you wanted him blitzing or not, he just got caught in no man's land. So you're right, that the one, maybe the biggest call, and he just said, we blew it. We kept saying we blew the coverage. Actually blew a dig route on the play before that to Cooper Kupp back in that playoff game where, if they stop either one of those, they have a chance to win. But, I immediately, I'm glad you said that. I immediately thought that is like, well, no time like the present. Now, to that end, we talked about the overtime loss to Kansas City, clock management, Cleveland in 2022, the NFC divisional playoff game in Detroit 2 years ago when the clock, there was time left and he kind of conceded the game because Detroit had screwed up.
They settled for some field goals against Atlanta. And
Yes, absolutely did. Well, to that end, they've hired Zach Beastline as their new director of football research, and he's been with the Jaguars for the last 12 seasons. He's now going to be their director of game management. And what he said about that is, well, just, having a full-time game day manager with every situation allows me to be a better head coach on both sides of the football while still getting advice from the full-time guy instead of piecing it together. They'd had Jackie Davidson and other people up there giving them, advice about take a time out here or whatever. This guy's full-time job is to understand the situations and relay that to Bowles in advance. And he said, we don't have to piece it together from a few people up top that may know a couple things instead of everything. He feels like Beastline knows everything. So they're going to meet in the offseason, go over all the situations and make sure they have good communication on game day. And he said he brings so much to the table in terms of the experience standpoint. And, he could make me a better coach and us a better team. So the first way to solve a problem is to recognize you have one. And I think the good thing about Bowles is he's not naive. He knows he has screwed up, even though he would still stand up there and try to, alibi for it. My favorite one was when they went to Cleveland and they got in some clock management issues. Could have called timeout because Cleveland basically had one play on fourth down. They either score, the game's over, and they did score, but he hadn't called timeout, so he didn't leave much time for Brady. And then he's kind of playing it safe on the first down. They don't complete a screen pass. Then Brady guns one down, and they're only a few yards from field goal range, but they run out of time because he didn't call timeout. And then he says, that's when he came up with it. Well, we didn't want to risk an interception when Brady had actually thrown 2 interceptions and over 400 passing attempts at that point. So he's kind of all over the map. There's been a lot of those types of games, none bigger than the one you mentioned, of course, Kansas City. So there's a mentality part of it, and then there's the execution part of it. He needs help to execute that. We'll see if he follows through from the mentality standpoint. But if you want your team to have a killer instinct, then start demonstrating one. That's what I would tell Todd. So we were at the breakers for this, NFL annual meeting with the owners and whatnot, which is just I don't. Have you been down to the breakers? You've seen that place in West Palm or Palm Beach?
Yes, I've seen it. I haven't stayed there.
It's
obviously.
It's a storied resort, obviously, and it's just opulent as it can be. But the NFL. First of all, I'm surprised they let us in the hotel anymore. Because we're like the unwashed, I guess. There's a lot of network partners, and they get, they're part of the club. Okay, they pay a lot of money to be in that club, and we don't. And so, when I tell you that our digs, if you will, were the temporary tent village, they erected it in the parking lot, Steve. Now it's a nice parking lot, right? There's some really, good greenery around there, flowers, all of that. But basically, we're in a temporary tent in the parking lot. And then they had the commission, they had the press conferences there in an adjacent tent. It was like a tent village, if you will. I had everything we wanted, but it was very, very cramped. like extremely cramped. And when we did the coaches breakfast for the NFC coaches, everybody's on top of everybody. You know, I could have, Bowles could have shaken hands with Raheem and Dave Canales if he wanted to. So there they all were, and of course the day before the AFC had their breakfast, and they did the coaches team picture, if you will, all 32 coaches. Raheem wasn't there because he had some flight problems. So standing next to Todd Bowles, have you seen this picture? Standing next to Todd Bowles is Liam Cohen in the photograph,
Yep.
which begs the phrase, keep your friends closer and your friends closer, your enemies closer. So he was asked about it, about, just, seeing Liam and all that. And he goes, hey, me and Liam are very close and we have a good relationship. He goes, it's all fun and games. Now, hold on now. I remember writing some stories that did not feel like neither fun nor games. Maybe games on Liam's part, but not on Bucs, when he snuck off to Jacksonville after saying he was going to stay here as their coordinator.
Well,
and he said,
I also think Jason Light put it best. He said, look, time heals.
Time heals. And that was actually Liam's statement. Remember when he told me in Jacksonville? I think Jason deliberately used that phrase, somewhat sarcastic. And it does. It absolutely does.
But Todd and Liam were close.
Yes.
And you can't fault a guy at the end of the day for becoming a head coach in the NFL. Now, the way
manner
he did it,
in which
can you
he
be
did
mad? Can you? Yes.
They're hurt. They had hurt feelings. There's no doubt they had hurt feelings.
Absolutely. But the guy gets to be one of 32 NFL head coaches.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what Todd said. He goes, look, he got a great opportunity there in Jacksonville. He goes, no matter how he left, right? He could have said in advance, I'm going to Jacksonville. I don't want to take this job as a coordinator right now. I want to see what the Jaguars offer me or not. And he said, no matter how he left, he goes, I'm still looking for an offensive coordinator. Like he was, whether he did it the right way or the wrong way, Jacksonville was going to hire him. And he goes, that's just the nature of the business. But we've done it 2 years in a row, and now I can move on from there. And I wish him the best. So that part's beneath him at this stage. And now we have Josh Grizzard, and he just reiterated that to get Grizzard up to speed, that'll be a big part of what Todd has to do in practice and training camps. They have what they call it periods, which resembles a game, right? Instead of having practices in the NFL and high school, for that matter, at other levels, they're scripted, right? We're going to do third and twos, third and three. We're going to do 1st and 10. We're going to do coming out periods. We're going to do, and so the defense kind of knows, what the group of plays are to some degree. It's a little easier to, to anticipate what the situation is. Well, when they do the call it periods, that resembles a game, because now no one's given. You're not working off cards. You're not working off predetermined, formations and down and distances that that you sort of know you're going to practice that day. And so you have to call it, just like it says. It's a call it period. And so they'll do a bunch of those to try to get Grizzard up to speed. And that'll be a lot of Grizzard's growth will have to be in the off season, OTAs and training camp. Because he's not called plays and he's not called a game. And so even though the offensive system's the same, it doesn't mean that it'll look the same or sound the same. And Grizzard's going to have to put his own spin on it. So that was the other part we talked about. Chris Godwin looks like he'll, the hope is he'll be, ready to go by the season opener. They think that's realistic in the sense that, just where he's at physically right now. And Bryce Hall, who had the exact same injury many weeks earlier, is now running full speed at this point, right? So if you kind of play that out, 7 weeks later, then that would mean that Chris Godwin would be running full speed. So we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, it was, there wasn't a ton of news that necessarily came out of the coaches' breakfast, but we did have a chance to talk to Joel Glazer, our sort of once a year media opportunity with him. We'll tell you about that here in just a second. But first, hey, get on down to Breitling Boutique. We talk about our sponsors, and I'll tell you, they've been great, not just to us, but you talk about the Breitling company, one of the best Swiss watch companies in the world. They've been at it now for over 140 something years, at International Plaza for more than 5 years. And they have the beautiful men's watches, the chronomats, the Navitimers, women's watches as well, sports watches in particular. We've talked to you about the limited time offer they have on the 32 NFL team watches. These are beautiful watches that have the color on the face of these chronomats and the team logos while supplies last. They've been a big seller for them. But get on down to Breitling Boutique. First thing you're going to notice is the customer service. It's second to none. They're used to dealing with a lot of celebrities. You'll probably see a Buccaneer or a professional athlete or two in there getting their watch on and getting their greatest timepiece. You should have one too. It's Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Make sure when you go that you let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. So one of the things I look forward to when we have the NFL owners meetings is, and at the conclusion of the meeting, which was Tuesday afternoon, we have a chance, and really our only chance during the season or preseason, off season, to talk with Joel Glazer, one of the co-owners of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And of course, this is a big 50th year anniversary, and we talked about that. They've commissioned what's going to be a huge feature film and a whole bunch of things that's going to come up to celebrate their history, which the Glazer family now has been the biggest part of that, since taking over the operation of the team in 1995. And in addition to that, the sort of the elephant in the room, if you will, with the Bucs has been that their stadium is coming up on 30 years old. And, for all the talk right now, with the Rays uncertainty, which became, I guess, Steve, even more uncertain because now that deadline passed, right? And so
correct,
that effectively voids whatever deal they once had or wanted to have with St. Petersburg. Is that right?
Yeah, that deal's off. The Rays now presumably have 3 more years at Tropicana Field, assuming it's ready to go for opening day next year.
Yeah.
Which everyone at this point says it will be, but you never know. They have 3 years left, but now they can
the
honest truth is they can negotiate anywhere, including outside of Tampa Bay.
That's right.
Now, whether baseball lets them move, that's a different story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But could they start having conversations with Nashville, Charlotte, Vegas, whatever?
Yeah.
I know Oakland or Sacramento is slated to go there, but that's not a done deal.
Right.
The honest truth is Stu's a free agent.
He's a free agent, and it's very scary.
Baseball can limit him.
And one of the options, if he were to go to Tampa, because you have to have land, if they couldn't make something happen in Ybor City or thereabouts, the biggest plot of land that's owned and operated by the Hillsborough County or the city of Tampa is just south of Raymond James Stadium. And so we had finally a chance to, confront Joel about their stadium because, these two are inexorably linked in many ways, especially if the Rays were to have any future over there. And, it's the juxtaposition of what's going on is right in your face because they're playing at Steinbrenner and they're parking at Raymond James and walking over that bridge, that pedestrian bridge over Del Mabry. And so the connectivity here is sort of right in your face, and it's going to be for a couple games, I guess, when we get to September, with the Buccaneers and whatnot. So Glazer did admit that they are focused on improving Raymond James and that they're evaluating options for their stadium, which of course opened in 1998. And he said that, it's something you're always looking at from a fan experience because it's so important, and it is. So he kind of like started off just generalities. We're constantly looking at the stadium, constantly looking at how we can improve it. We did stuff about 6 years ago. I think they put in like $160 million, basically upgraded a lot of the clubs in those areas. He says, but now it's 6 years later, and there's been a lot of new stadiums built, a lot of different renovations done, some advances. So we're currently looking at all those types of things and evaluating it. There'll be a time and a place, but we'll always want to improve our stadium and keep it to its highest standards. That's a quote you could have given 10 years ago, 15, 20. That doesn't play now. They need more than that. They need so much more than that. And in fact, over in Hillsborough County, they've sort of, in various stories I've read and written, kind of lamented the fact that the Glazers really haven't confronted them or at least shared with them their actual plans, right? They know they have plans. They know they have to do something here before long because I think their lease expires in 2028, I want to say.
That's
or
correct.
2028. In any case, they're expecting it, but there hasn't been, they haven't really shared anything with them. And of course, when you roll out these plans, whatever their grandiose plans are for renovating Raymond James, God forbid, not tearing it down and rebuilding it, but there's going to be significant, construction. There's usually a price tag attached to that, right? So, like, you can't just say, "Hey, we're building this big building. What's it cost?" I don't know. There's going to be some estimates, and then you start talking about financing, and then people get upset. So they've kind of skipped that stage to this point until they have all their bells and whistles and wants. I think.
I don't know. Kind of sounds like another owner.
Yeah, kind of does. You're right.
We don't know what they want. We know that there's deadlines coming.
Yep.
Whether it was the baseball stadium in Ybor that they had a 3-year window and nothing came out till 6 months left.
Yeah.
Not really setting yourself up for success.
No, but deadlines have a way of making people talk.
Well, you don't get your best deal unless there's a deadline. Right now, there's not a deadline.
That's right.
Yes, the Glazers want renovations at the stadium. Yes, the stadium's going to need renovations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the county is going to be responsible for some of that for sure.
And they want to know. The county wants to, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
What do we know you need one, right? We know you need to do something. We know the lease is coming up. What are we doing, right?
Well, and for instance, the sports authority's got to make renovations for the national championship college football game that's coming in a couple of years.
Yeah, and if you ever want to have another one,
you're
going to have to do something with that stadium.
But part of getting the deal is they have to make some renovations. They'd like to work with the Bucs on it so that it's all going the same direction.
Right.
But they haven't heard from them yet.
And so we kind of got in a little, not really a spat, but kind of a disagreement. But is Joel said, he goes, I've heard people say there's been no communication. That's actually not very accurate. Not very accurate.
I'm sure accurate. No communication is not accurate. I guarantee there's been conversations.
Yes, but not from the standpoint of here's our plans, here's what it costs, let's talk. Right.
Yeah, well, here's what we want. We want to cover all the seats.
Yeah,
a la what Miami did, or
we
something
want
else.
We want a climate controlled stadium. Yeah. We want new bones put on this area. We want to do this to the end zones. Yeah. Like what?
My guess is they haven't been very specific at all like that.
I don't think.
But have they had conversations about it needs renovations?
Yeah.
Yes. This area is not good enough. This isn't good. Yes. I believe all that's happened.
Yeah, and for years and years, my wife and I talked about doing things with our house, and it wasn't until we actually sat down with an architect and and put the money and the paper to the pencil did we actually do anything. But we had to share it, and so it's a little bit of semantics here. But he says, it's not very accurate. We're going through a phase right now where we're assessing the stadium, what might be needed. I know they're assessing the stadium and what might be needed. And once both of us are done with our assessments, then we come together and work through things. We've always had an excellent relationship with everybody at the TSA. They do great. They do a great job at Hillsborough County. And that's the process that's happening right now. It's just patiently working through what everybody has to do. It's such an important part of the community with all the other events to come to town. You talk about Taylor Swift, and it's not just them, and tourism and all that. And so, we got to make sure that we come together and meet the needs, of the community and all that stuff. Sounds swell. Sounds great. Okay. Well, what if the Rays in the interim decide we want to plop our stadium right there at Ray J in lot 14, which is just south of the stadium, which is one of the more valuable pieces of real estate. I don't think the Bucs are going to want that. I don't think that for a minute. My guess is they probably have plans down the road sometime to develop that area for themselves. Maybe not like Stu was going to do with St. Petersburg, but anything in and around Raymond James is valuable to the Buccaneers in particular. And so, I just think there's, and I know why they're doing it. I know why they're taking this tact, and it's because of their experience the first time around. it became toxic. I mean, this team was so close. I can't emphasize to you how close they were. Buccaneer fans should owe the late Art Modell a debt of gratitude for their franchise still being here. Because I trust me, it would be in Baltimore right now. But Modell up and took that deal shockingly to all Cleveland fans. And of course, then they put an expansion team back in Cleveland that are now the Cleveland Browns. But the original Cleveland Browns are the Baltimore Ravens. And for all the world, that was Glazer's leverage. And when Modell took that gig, he was forced to come back to the table and really, figure out if there's a way he can make do, with a new stadium here in Tampa. And of course, the community investment tax helped all that along and all that. And yet, they came very close to leaving. And so it became, during that time, it was contentious. It was really contentious between the city, the county. I talked to Rich McKay, whose dad, was not coaching the team at the time, but was a figure, obviously. And people would get into shouting matches, at restaurants with them. Like he said, it just got really ugly. It was really political. Nobody had heard of the community investment tax at that point. How are they going to pay for it? How could you take money from police and teachers and schools and all this sort of stuff? So they're trying to avoid that. And when you think about, the pushback they get in England about Manchester U and all that stuff, you can see why the Glazers are sort of in this cocoon, a little bit. They want everything done. They want all their wishes on paper before they present anything, because they don't want the debate, because once you roll it out there, then everybody's going to pick it apart and say, yeah, no, it costs too much, or we're not going to, you don't have enough in the project, or why don't you do this instead? So I think as much as anything, this is a calculation on their part to say, hey, we don't want debate about this stadium. And Steve, I gotta be honest with you. What has Sternberg had to endure? Right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Once you start poking around and asking and putting out drawings, and people attach money to it, right? That's when you get a lot of the cynicism and the pushback, and deals fall apart. And
but the Rays deal fell apart because Stu backed out.
No, I understand that. But there was there's a bunch of years before that where they couldn't even get to that point.
Right. Well, but like the Ybor Stadium, they had 3-year window to negotiate. Nothing came out till 6 months left.
I know.
Like you didn't give it enough time.
No. But that's one of those too where like they thought the best deal would come on a deadline. I think.
Right. Yeah. Look with the Bucs, and I believe this with the Rays and Stu, and we've talked about this. Like the fact that it's not getting ugly in public, is. I guess at the end of the day, it depends on what the intentions of everybody is. Right. If the Bucs' intentions is to stay here, it's going to get done. The county has known this is coming. It's not a secret that the stadium needs updated. It's 30 years old. There's no secret. Everybody knows.
Right.
The Bucs know too. Now, what the specifics are, that has to be determined. And the
financing is how much are they on the hook for?
Well, exactly. My guess is has anything specific been decided or what? No. Has there been talks about a ballpark range of the finances of it? Probably. Looking at, $750 million, or is it $1 billion?
Oh, it's $1 billion.
It's most likely.
I don't think you can do anything to a stadium anymore for under $1 billion. If you want a new one, it's over $2 billion.
Sure. And so, has that, when they say, no, that no communication's not true. I believe that, and I don't think the Glazers want to leave here.
No, I don't either.
And I 30 years ago was a different story. But I don't think they want to leave here now.
If you're the city, though, now, and you're trying to solve the Rays problem as well, or you have an opportunity to keep the Rays in Tampa Bay, and more specifically, maybe Hillsborough County, doesn't that turn up the flame a little bit to want to know exactly? Because I don't care what you say about the Rays. I think Hillsborough County is first and foremost going to take care of the Bucs. And so it's very hard for them to go down the track because
there's two things. Hillsborough County has two buildings that are 30 years old.
Yeah, that's right.
It's Ray J and Amalie Arena.
That's right.
And both are going to need some investments.
Mm-hmm.
What the level is, those are being discussed. I don't know. Is probably, if I had to guess, it's $1 billion for Ray J.
Yep.
That ballpark range. Amalie Arena is going to get several $100,000. Now, it would help to know the numbers if you want to try to build a Ray Stadium here in Tampa. But those are going to get the priorities over a Ray Stadium, which is part of the reason the Rays have struggled to find a foothold in Tampa.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of money that's coming due to facilities that are 30 years old or getting there. I mean, Amalie Arena opened, 96? That's
Raymond James, 98.
Yeah. They started building those buildings over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Both buildings need upgrades.
That's the shelf life. That's what you got.
And so you've got those investments coming, which is why Hillsborough can't commit a ton. Now, if they get better ideas of what those numbers are, then maybe there's something that could be done.
Right. Well, it's going to be a lot. And the thing is, there's also going to be changes, in my opinion. I think if the Bucs have another bite of the apple, and that's what we're talking about here, you're talking about signing a new lease, right? It's and a lot of that will depend on what the public financing is and everything like that. But if I'm the Buccaneers, and I've talked to enough people about stadiums these days, and I think Stu was in this picture to some degree, they're going to probably take on the risk, right, for overruns. Now, the one thing the Bucs have in their favor is there's currently a stadium there. They don't have to worry about environmental studies or the electric grid or any of that stuff, right? Like it's all there, and maybe there'd be some things that could happen that could delay construction, but they're going to want to take the risk in exchange for that, because they did this in Atlanta when the Falcons, took over the stadium when the Georgia Dome was taken down. That means you're taking on the cost overruns of that, but it also means you're going to control the stadium. Right now the TSA, they have some kind of a rev share. TSA operates it. Bucs get revenues from all events there. Even the Taylor Swift concert and stuff like that. I think what will change is it'll be the Bucs stadium. The lease will say we get to decide who comes here, and only we get to decide, and we're the only ones that are going to share this revenue. This is going to us because we took the risk. We're going to build the ballpark. We're going to take public money. Don't get it twisted. We're going to need X number of dollars from this community investment tax, which got extended, which was the key to everything. If that didn't get extended this past November, then we wouldn't be having these discussions about, they'd be looking in other cities. But they're still going to want public money, but they're going to want all the control. And in exchange for that, they're going to take on all the risk as far as overruns go. But my guess is, instead of having, 20 concerts a year, 50 events a year, you might see 100. That's the difference when the Falcons took over the Georgia Dome, or the new Mercedes Stadium up there, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They started booking events all the time because it's their building, and the more tenants you can have, the more events you can have, even if it's, your net profit is, after expenses, is like $1 million on a weekend for a 2-day concert palooza, then you're going to do it. You're going to be in the stadium booking business. So there's a lot coming with this, right? It's not just, hey Hillsborough, TSA, whatever, you guys are contributing $800 million and we're going to give you $200 million. Like that those numbers are going to be revealing enough. But then you're going to have on top of it, no, this is now our stadium. Yeah, it's built with taxpayer money, and yeah, it's going to be renovated with taxpayer money, a big chunk of it. But it's really, we want to be in charge and keep all the profits, which I think you're going to get a tremendous pushback. So they don't want it. That's just my opinion. I don't know anything. I'm just guessing that's where we're headed with this thing. It's bigger than just that dollar amount, right? and so they don't want to start the debate, but they're going to have to here soon. And what's coming to a head is how much will Hillsborough be willing to help the Rays? How much can they help them when they know that the Glazers are going to be asking for major renovations and financing and everything? So your boy is now the favorite for the AL MVP. Is that what I'm hearing?
MVP.
It's insane, man.
Talk about a killer instinct. I think Todd Bowles should sign Jake Mangum.
What took him so long to get to the big leagues? If they knew he could go 6 for 6.
No, he went 6 straight hits. He's 7 for 8 in the last 2 games.
Wow.
With several ribbies, several stolen bases, runs. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty amazing. Reminds me of my first month at Arkansas State. Let me just warn Jake, it doesn't stay that way. It does not stay like that. Well, good for him, man. That's exciting. I mean, he does have the most hits in SEC history, so there's that. But
he might have the most hits against the Pirates this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. Boy, the Pirates aren't good, huh? You've seen them now?
No, they're not good.
Not a good team. Neither are the Rockies, by the way. So is this fool's gold? Or are we just watching, like, they've won now, what, 4 out of 5 to start the season?
That's correct. 4-1. And the one game they lost, it was only because Colorado was amazing defensively that game.
Right. They left like 12 guys on base, I think.
Yeah, had a couple guys thrown out at home on tremendous relays.
It was insane. Yeah. So they should have won all of those games. But, I mean, pretty good start. Obviously, 4-1. And
well, let's see. Let's go through the starting rotation.
Huh?
Pepio gave up 1 earned run.
Yeah,
Bradley, 1 earned run.
He was good, too.
Littell, 1 earned run. Rasmussen, no earned runs. Okay. Boz, no earned runs. Their starter's ERA is .93.
Is that good?
Yeah. Their overall team ERA is 1.6, which amazingly is not the best in baseball. The Padres are actually 1.50, but
yeah. Oh, by the way, most of those guys went at least 6 innings too, I think.
Pepio, Bradley, Littell went 6, Rasmussen and Boz went 6, Rasmussen went 5.
Yeah. So I mean, they're also getting exactly where they want them to be this time of year. You don't necessarily stretch them out beyond that, but the bullpen has been lights out.
Well, and they're 4th in baseball in batting average.
That's the surprising thing right there.
They're 296, which last year, remember, they were like hovering at 210, 212, 220, whatever it was, and only the White Sox were worse than them, basically.
Brandon Lau has his home run trot down. He's hitting the ball very far, and that's good to see, and he's kind of carried that over from spring training. He said something in the postgame. Now, this has been a theme, Steve. If I hear it once, I go, oh, that's nice. If I hear it twice, I'm like, okay, this is kind of like these guys, this is sort of their anthem. But now I'm hearing it from every player. Now, this is easy to say when you've won, 4 out of 5. But I think even before that, because we heard that it wasn't a good clubhouse last year, these guys really enjoy playing with each other. And Lau brought that up again after the game in the post-game interview. And he was just talking about, it's just such a great clubhouse. These guys are so much fun to come to work with. And, just the way we approach the game. And that's the biggest difference. Like, and even I think, like, if you just listen, to Brandon, like he sounds different, right? Like he's always kind of been this, not a real verbose guy, but certainly not a cheerleader, and man, he's incredibly upbeat. Of course, he's off to a good start, but like I'm starting to believe it. I think Kevin Cash talked about it in the offseason, how that was a big focus, that, wanted to make sure that, a year ago they had some guys that, quite frankly, for lack of a better term, were kind of playing out the string. They were not that interested in whether they won or they lost, as long as they had their numbers or whatnot. But
I mean, think back to last year. So you built your whole team around a guy named Wander Franco, who the year before in August gets suspended, or under legal investigation, arrested.
Yeah,
in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
So you come in the next year, and your biggest bat, the center of your lineup, the guy you kind of built your franchise around, isn't there.
Yeah.
Yandy Diaz and Randy Arozarena, your next 2 big stars, get off to horrible starts.
Horrific slumps, yeah.
I mean, their first month and a half was awful.
Yeah.
And the team struggled.
Yeah.
And you haven't seen the Rays team struggle like that in a long time.
Right.
And I believe that probably a lot of guys started playing for individual stats.
Mm-hmm.
And playing out the string because they're not used to it, whatever else. And I think there's probably a reason why guys like Siri and Arozarena were traded. Things maybe we didn't see and know.
I agree.
This is me speculating. I don't know that, but it wouldn't surprise. I mean, Randy was great with the fans, and he's a tremendous player. And not saying he's a bad guy or even a bad clubhouse guy. Maybe it just didn't fit with a lot of the other group. I don't know that. It's a speculation. But when you look at the guys that are gone from the team, and now you're hearing this, how great the clubhouse is in this. Sometimes there's addition by subtraction when it comes to that part of the game.
Oh, I truly believe that. I believe that with my heart and soul. I do. I've seen it. I've seen it in the Bucs. There were eras when, and some of this was ownership built in the cake a little bit because they didn't want to spend money on free agents during a certain period of time that Raheem Morris was the coach. But if you take chances on players from a character standpoint, or just don't get the right mix of players that don't get along well together, those places become toxic. You're never going to, first of all, baseball, 25 guys, right? I've never been on a team where everybody got along like they were friends. I've seen some teams and covered teams that the two biggest stars hated each other, but when it was time to win, when it was time to get on the field and battle for 3 hours, they battled together.
Yep.
They put aside everything and they went out and they just were warriors, man. They didn't care about stats or anything. They just wanted to win, and they supported each other on the field. Off the field, they really didn't care for each other. But I think in this case, when it's been wrong, like, to your point, like when it doesn't feel right. And last year didn't feel right to me with the Rays for all the things you mentioned. And so when you remove some of those elements, it's addition by subtraction. Guys want to be able to come to work every day, and everybody's, trying to do everything they can to possibly win, which is tough because in professional sports, somebody's going to take your job, right? You're either going to get hurt, you're not going to produce. There's a million people that want that job. And so it's a very insecure profession to begin with. But within that, you got to find a way to come together and be a team. And I think these guys sort of have that, and if you look at who their leaders are now versus, what was going on with the Francos and the Rosarenas and some of that stuff, I think it's much more settled. So, and also, tell me if I'm wrong about this. Look, I know Josh Lowe's hurt, and that sucks, right? But how about the stories they've had in the first 7 games of this ball club, or 5 or 6, 7 games, whatever it's been? How about these young kids coming up here and having the biggest hits and the biggest impact? Man, nothing energizes a team than to see a young guy, get his chance and his dream and then go out there and fulfill it. Like, that's exciting. You're living this guy's dream right in front of you. And we've seen that happen in several games now, with players that were actually literally in Durham when the season started and then called back up for various injuries, and they've come in here and they've had the biggest hits, since the Rays started over in. Plus, we talked about this, the energy of Steinbrenner Field, being outdoors. I was listening to Brian Anderson, and he was saying, man, I can't wait for tomorrow. He goes, I get to go home. I'm going to, get up really early, get my exercise on, whatever. I'm going to get to the ballpark. I got an outdoor baseball, and we're going to play our game on a getaway day for the Rockies. And he goes, the
Pirates.
The Pirates. And he goes, I'll be home grilling steaks by 5:30. He goes, tomorrow's going to be the greatest day ever. He goes, outdoor baseball in the afternoon.
Well, not only that, but it's Ryan Pepio versus Paul Skeens.
Yeah, which is like the greatest pitching matchup of the season so far. Anytime Paul Skeens it's part of that, but Pepio against him is going to be phenomenal. And the game will probably last about an hour and 15 minutes, the way those two guys work. But yeah, and that's what I mean. Like there's a buzz, there's an energy now about outdoor baseball, and the weather's still good, and all that's going to going to take on a different path when you start playing better teams. And I don't know that you could dial up two franchises that you'd want to start the season with at home against more than the Rockies and the Pirates.
That definitely helps. It definitely helps. And
if you're playing the Yankees right now, we'll probably have a different picture.
Right. But momentum and confidence.
Sure.
They're going to take that into Texas this weekend, and then
that's right.
Then they're back home again.
Yep. That'll be another that'll be another challenge for them to go on the road and see how they do. But yeah, what a great start. What a great story for them so far. Another sellout. They did it again. 10,000 and what, 48? Is that what the
46.
capacity is? 46.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yep. And speaking of teams on the road right now, the Lightning had a chance to clinch a playoff berth on Tuesday night. They did their part and beat the Islanders 4-1.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Columbus and Montreal both won. They both had to lose in regulation for the Lightning to clinch a playoff berth. So Thursday night, here, the scenario is the Lightning have 8 games to go. The easiest way to clinch is win one of those 8 games and you clinch a playoff berth.
Wow.
But if Columbus and Montreal both lose a game in regulation, then you clinch that way too. Like
you can back in, yeah.
Yeah, and the Rangers actually technically are still alive. They'd have to win out to catch the Lightning. And Lightning
more importantly, like first place is still attainable for the Lightning because they play Florida.
That is true. So Lightning in second place, they're 1 point behind Toronto and 1 point ahead of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Because Florida lost in overtime on Tuesday night. So, but the Lightning play both Florida and Toronto one more time. So the Lightning control their own destiny as far as winning the division. And when you win the division, that means you're most likely going to play Ottawa in the first round instead of Toronto or Florida.
That's huge, man. My druthers, if you're a Lightning fan, I think would be to just don't play Florida, get anybody else, win one series, get things going, get off the snide with the one and dones, and then anything seems possible after that. You get a little momentum, and then you got to beat them anyway at some point down the road. So, but I just don't. I don't think you want to start off with Florida, which is what they would do today if the playoffs started today, which they don't.
Yes, they would host, so they would have home ice this time.
They'd have home ice, which my
theory.
If it
gets to a game 7, you want that.
It's nice, but my theory about home ice is that like the early games, there's such an expectation that you're going to win that game that when you don't, it is such a letdown. And now you're fighting in game 2, just to avoid being down 2-0 going on the road. Like so much pressure that way.
Yep.
I'd almost rather
game
start
7. You do want it at home.
You want home ice on game 7, no question. There's no question about that. So yeah, overall, it's a big deal.
And quite frankly, the Lightning have played very well at home this year.
Yes, that's true.
They've been on the road.
Yeah, that's true too. It's a good point.
So having 4 home games in a series better than 3, considering the way they play at home.
No, that's true. That's true. All that makes sense to me. So we're wrapping it up, man. Is about 2 weeks left? Is that what it is?
8 games left. 2 weeks from Thursday is the last day of the regular season.
Wow.
2 weeks from Saturday, the playoffs start.
And then the greatest postseason in any sport. I don't care what you say. It is just an absolute emotional roller coaster and a physical one for those guys too. It's just great to see teams lay it out like that. In the NHL postseason. I love it. All right. Just another reminder, get on down to Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Check out all the beautiful Swiss watches with the Breitling company that's been in business over 140 years at International Plaza for more than 5+ years. Let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. They got men's watches, women's watches. You're going to love them all. You're going to love the customer service. Breitling Boutique, International Plaza. Thanks for listening. For Steve Versnick, I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.